якраз люди почали заходити активно. Ну, я думаю, що просто не можна довше чекати вже. Да, все є, ми з нею говорили. Dear all, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We shall start. I see a lot of people are still coming from the official inauguration of the Ukrainian pavilion, but as we are not only those who are sitting here in the Teatro Piccolo in Arsenale, but also the audience that is watching us online, because this event is streamed online on the Facebook page of the event. I think we don't want anyone waited longer, so we shall start. And I'm grateful to everyone who came to the opening event, to the opening of the Ukrainian Pavilion public program at the 59th International Art Exhibition. We gave the general name to this program as the Decolonizing Art Beyond the Obvious, but this topic as wide as the question is, what changes are we living through at the moment, and what will world look like shortly when the war is over, or it turns into something else. The opening discussion of this very wide dialogue that we designed together with the curators of the National Pavilion and myself. My name is Tatiana Filevska. I'm the creative director of the Ukrainian Institute. We are partners of this public program. We decided, we can't go into a deeper and further discussion before we talk about what's happening at the moment. What is happening at the moment in Ukraine and what is happening with the world as this devastating war of Russia against Ukraine unfolds, and we are able to watch it online. So the first discussion is called how Russian war against Ukraine changed the world and the art world. And today we have with us great speakers. We are happy to have them, and thank you for coming. And the first speaker is Serhiy Plokhy, director of the Ukrainian Research Institute at Harvard University. 2 days ago, Alevtina Kakhidze, an artist, came to Venice from Kyiv area. It is the first time she actually left Ukraine in the past 2 months. Boris Filonenko was already seen on this stage before, a few days ago. He is a co-curator of the Ukrainian Pavilion and a curator from Kharkiv. And we also have an online speaker, Olesya Ostrovska, who is director of Art Arsenal, the largest art institution in Ukraine. She will be joining us a bit later online. We can see Olesya already. We have been speaking these few days not only about the Milk of Dreams, the main topic of this biennial suggested by Cecilia Alemani, but also a lot about the war, actually. And it's really, really important that we realize that the reality of these hectic days of the biennial is somewhat unreal to those people who are under everyday shellings today. And on this image that you can see, it's not an artwork at all. It's the number of shelling that Kyiv has had since 2 months. So the red dots you can see is the air alarm, and the green line is the length in minutes on how long the alarm went. So altogether, my city has come through more than 500 hours of alarm, and which can be calculated in hundreds of bombs and rockets over the capital of a European country. Can you return, please, the poster? Thank you. I think I don't want to take any more time from the speakers, and I would like to pose the first question to Serhiy Plokhy, and this would be the most general, I think, question of every person who is thinking about the current events. What has changed to the world since 24th February? What is the shift that we are in Ukraine making at the moment? A country so little known just a little bit less than 2 months ago, and now a newsmaker #1. And is this change or is this situation can be observed as some kind of a local conflict between two countries, or is it a wider global change that shifting the international architecture, and what maybe we still have to expect from this change and from this shift?
Thank you for this question, and thanks for inviting me to be on this panel. It's a pleasure and honor to be a part of this event. It's an important question and somewhat difficult to answer, because on the one hand, the Kyiv and the rest of Ukraine woke to the new war in February 24th of this year. On the other hand, this is the war that has been going on since 2014. So it is a new war and it's an old war. What is very different about this war is certainly its scope, and it is different the impact that it has on the international community and international society. It's certainly not a regional war or not a local war anymore. It has global repercussions, especially it is very clear here in Europe, in Venice, in Italy in general. All over Europe you can see blue and yellow colors at some of the key architectural landmarks in the European capitals. So it is Europe is waking up, and the world as a whole, to a new reality. And that new reality is linked to the fact that the expectations that the world had for a long period of time, since the fall of the Berlin Wall, the expectations that history had come to an end, history meaning that, as Francis Fukuyama was writing about that the liberal government, the liberal democracy is certainly now a winner, or the winner, that there is no real competition to that. That didn't materialize on the one hand, but there was also a different understanding of the end of history, that the history of the war of atrocities, the history in which one country can attack another and annex part of the territory, that there can be an unprovoked aggression, that there can be armies on the scope of World War II moving across Europe, that world is certainly behind us, that it is not coming back, that somehow we learned the lessons. And that wishful thinking is gone by now. It certainly was gone by many in Ukraine, or by majority in Ukraine, by the early morning of February 24th, 2022. But by now it certainly came to an end to most of people in Europe and globally as well. And when people look for the language to describe what is happening, what is going on today, what you see is that there are references for the repertoire and historical repertoire that is already known to us. World War II is certainly right there. The genocide is the term, and it's not just the term, it's the concept and the reality on the ground that is back. The revival of the unity of the West reminds many about Cold War. So there is a lot of historical parallels, World War II, Cold War, but there are also people who are saying that, well, we are in a different place in a sense that it is a 19th century war in a sense of what it is fought over, because it is a history of the imperial collapse and the former metropoly trying to retake control over the former possessions and former territories. but is fought 19th century war, fought with 20th century rhetoric, from fascism to Nazism to and with 21st century weapons. And what that means is that despite all this, our attempts to look for the parallels, to look for the roots, to look for the causes of the war, either in 19th century, 20th, or 21st, we can't find exactly the century. We can't find exactly the war. We can't find exactly the tragedy that would really mirror what is happening now, because it is local and it is global at the same time. It is happening at the time when world went through this period of globalization, where there is a revolt, the populist revolt, almost all over the globe against globalization. It is the moment when the world is linked and connected to a degree that was impossible even a few decades ago with the social networks. It's the world in which propaganda acts very differently from the way how it acted back in the 20th century, and we don't know what to do with that. It is the world in which there is no any more authority, and on the other hand, there is a world that still allows for people like Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to emerge suddenly within a few weeks to the size of a figure of Winston Churchill, at least in sense of the position, in terms of the bravery, in terms of the those words that are being used and how they're being used. So despite all of these parallels with history, we are in a different place, and it's up to us to find the way out of it. And one thing that is very obvious today is that the war is very local and the killing is very local, and it is very personal, and the suffering is personal. But it is also a global war, saying that the dividend of the peace that came with the fall of the Berlin Wall, that it had been spent. And it had been spent maybe not in the most effective way. Certainly it wasn't spent in that way. It is a war in which there is realignment of the powers in this world. So it is a global one. And it can come to an end also through the global effort, at least through the regional effort. It is global war, it is also a European war, the largest since World War II. And in that sense, it's also a wake-up call in terms of our naivete to a degree. When we believe that 1930s and fascism, they can't come back, that the World War II can't come back. Now we know that those things, they do come back. And we know that we are actually not ready to deal with them. So, and the way out we can find only together, and whether it comes to the political position, whether it comes to weapons, whether it comes to thinking about what is happening to us, to the world, thinking, feeling, expressing that's where art is so powerful in building bridges. And I hope that, again, I'm sure, it's not that I hope, I know that art is also a solution to this war and to this atrocities and to this crisis that we are in today.
Thank you for this historical arch ability to look at this situation from above, and maybe this distance that we are able to have, thinking and observing the situation, can ease the pain that each Ukrainian is going through at the moment, and each person is dealing with. Alevtina Kahidze is an artist who lived in Kiev area in a small village called Muzici, and she just left her home 3 days ago and arrived to Venice, and it was her first trip outside of the area in 2 months. Alevtina was also one of the first artists in Ukraine who went to study abroad, and in 2004 she went to Maastricht. She was actively working with international institutions and presented her art in big events and biennials, for example, Manifesta, or in museums abroad. After Russia occupied Donbass in 2014, Alevtina's mom stayed in occupied territories, and she would come back and forth from the occupied territory to Ukraine. And she died on the checkpoint in 2019. For the last 7 years, this war is the main topic of Alevtina's art. But my question is, what has changed in your life, in your art, since the 24th February?
Does it work? Hello. Actually, it was not easy to make a decision to come, and it's the same with many Ukrainians. Probably it would be very difficult for you to understand that many Ukrainians don't want to leave the country, and I was some of those. But Tanya actually forced me to come here in order I will tell what I know. This is also was one of the points to know. And if to talk about my capacities or skills to draw this very hard political context, which is actually Ukraine is since November 2013, be honest. So this is how I actually learned how to be absolutely ready to draw every day. Doesn't matter that, let's say, if you remember in February 2014, during the long-term protest we called Maidan, 100 people were killed in the center of the capital in Kyiv. Probably you know this. If not, I remind you this. I draw in this day as well. And of course, I started to draw when my hometown was occupied in April 2014. And when in February, all my friends, all institutions with which I worked, asked me in the beginning of February, Alevtina, what is going on in your country? The war is already there. And actually for me, all those questions were just questions. And I started to draw. I draw the beginning of this war in a way of expectations. And even the drawing, if I remember, 23 of February, it was said that if tomorrow is no war, the war is still in Ukraine. I wanted to say that the war which started in 2014 in Donbass was not over. So, and answering your question, what actually the difference? The difference is that when my mom experienced the war in Donbass, she phoned me every day. And I somehow trying to remember everything what she did say to me, and I put in words and in lines. And I would say reconstructed the war for all my Kyiv's friends, and then it was clear for international audience. But the thing is that everything what my mom described, I just through the empathy, because she's a close person to me, I tried to understand. And it was so interesting when the thing started to happen to me. For instance, like she explained me how wet and cold in a cellar, and she doesn't want to go there even if there is a shelling. I remembered her. Or for instance, when there was very hard rain, I also mistaken this with shelling. And I remember how she told me this, that they were mistaken and went to the cellar, but it was just rain. And it was really like, if déjà vu is a strange word, but still it is. So I must say that I was absolutely equipped somehow, but I do agree that these two wars were absolutely different. Because the first one, if we can say, we don't still have vocabulary for it, it was pretty hybrid war. And actually, my decision to stay in Kyiv region, not to go away, not to run, was based on the data I received from my mom. I mean, what happened in Donbass was absolutely different what happened in Kyiv region recently. So it's pretty different situation, but it also alike. And it also like without, how to live without electricity, how you can be absolutely tired because you don't have any calm night. You're absolutely tired every day. You just can't somehow feel as a normal person. And all your life is getting be just life without a future. You don't plan sin. You just have morning, you have daytime, and you have evening. And you know that the night is going to be, and you're going in a cellar. So briefly, it's like this. But between all of those, I did draw many images. So I would say it was kind of graphic novels. And everything what I actually I don't know, experience, try to depict, try to ask myself what the things are. It was in the wartime diary or something like this. But even I can't call it art. For me, it's kind of alternative journalistic or something like this. Because if to talk about art, you need distance. And sometimes I haven't had this distance. But on the other hand, having this privilege to draw whatever I could actually experience, I understood immediately that I had this privilege from my neighbors, because when you draw something, you immediately receive a distance and become subjective, and you are not a victim anymore. You're really trying to be a bit out of the situation. And since I'm a drawer, as I remember myself, even if the shellings are, you still can have many, many feelings, like joy if the drawings looks well, or you can be disappointed in something went well. Boris is smiling. Yes, artists are the artists. But the thing is, anyway, you can become a queen of your own life, and this is the privilege which artists do have. But of course, we also had other things to do, and Tanya, you didn't ask me about this, because of course we all became volunteers, we all became helpers to each other. So, and this is, I'm not as an artist, but just a citizen.
I did ask. I asked how your life and art changed since the 24th of February. So yeah, but I agree that everyone has that volunteer, other type of activities. We actually, I think, mentioned the privilege of planning several times during the previous days at different occasions. And really, when you don't have the privilege to control even your own plans for the next, let's say, days, yeah, and you get a control over the quality of your drawing, that definitely, gives you some energy. Yeah. Thank you, Alevtina. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for coming here. I really appreciate. I would like to pass the mic now to Olesa Ostrovska, who is online with us. Olesa is the director of Art Arsenal. Art Arsenal is the largest state art institution in Ukraine. I think it can be compared to Arsenalia in Venezia, where we are now, and Arsenal holds numerous festivals, events, big artistic exhibitions, but also book fair and other events. I would like to ask Olesa to share her ideas and thoughts about what Ukrainian culture actually has to tell the world now, and why is it important to know about us to understand why all this situation is happening in Ukraine, and why actually Ukraine is making this change in the world now. But before that, I would like to ask her to share how is Arsenal undergoing the current situation, how are you coping with it?
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you here to join you for this event. Greetings from Kiev. Tanya actually asked me even before the panel, how is it to be still in Kiev? So how is Arsenal doing right now? And I gave a little bit of thought to that. And let me share a few feelings, what it is to be in Kiev. So as you stay in Kiev, you have to make a few efforts. And the first and very obvious effort is to stay alive and functioning. And that is, of course, that has to do with air threat sirens and other threats that you are facing every day. That's one thing. Another thing, which is very complicated, I guess, is trying to keep yourself from growing indifferent. You stop feeling things the way you used to feel a month ago, and you have to remind yourself about what is going on. And the third thing is to keep yourself from being paradoxically, on the contrary, melodramatic. You have to somehow control melodrama within yourself, and you have to try to understand your experience as well. And there, I think Aleftina is very, very right, saying that artists are privileged to be able to be subjective, emotional, to be even melodramatic, because they serve very much as a nerve of the time. And artistic practice, for me, myself, personally, Aleftina's artistic practice, which I followed on Facebook all the time, was very helpful, both to keep myself from being too melodramatic and from being too insensitive. And speaking about Arsenal as a team, as an organization, it's been a huge experience for all of us. Many of my colleagues are scattered all around Ukraine and Europe, but not... actually, I was surprised myself to realize that the largest part of the team is still staying in Kiev or around Kiev, and I do think that explains, or at least it can be seen as a illustration to what's going on. You do feel that you have to stay in Kiev. You don't feel that living is the most appropriate step. Just like Aleftina described, you feel that you need to stay in the epicenters of the events, and everything is measured. Then you experience a very strange thing. Everything is suddenly much simpler, because everything is measured to literally life and death. And then there is this notion of responsibility as well, which is again melodramatic. So you have to check it in yourself, which is controlling what you are doing. So that's, I think this is the most interesting experience in my personal, professional life, and also in the life of our team, I guess. And there, I would like to finish with a quote which is constantly on my mind. It's a quote by David Borlyuk, a famous Ukrainian futurism figure from the beginning of 20th century, who is known to have said that the man is not a lice, it can get used to everything. So you have to control this in yourself, first not to get used to everything, to lose your sensitivity, and on the other hand, to check this drive for melodrama that you are living in. So that's first part of it. Now the second question was about what's going on with Ukrainian culture. Why is it important to follow it? Is that right? It's a strange question to ask a Ukrainian, because to Ukrainian culture is obviously very important. Just like, on the other hand, you always have this answer that every culture is important. But when I started to think what exactly Ukrainian cultural scene can offer to global community right now, I think that one of the things is the ability to translate very subtle authoritarian signs, the ability to sense them and to convey them to other communities. Ukrainian political imagination is extremely sensitive to signs of authoritarianism. Let me give you an example. For example, when we hear German or French political leaders, such as Olaf Scholz or Emmanuel Macron, that Russia does has legitimate interests and you have to take them into account, and that Ukrainians and Russians are brotherly nations, you somehow feel that this political language remains in the realm of an illusion. An illusion is that that democracy, security, well-being are so precious that there is no world power who would like to or want to overthrow this benign regime. While when you look from Kiev, you have a feeling that in Russian political imagination, dominance is much more desirable than democracy. And democracy is even an obstacle to dominance. And this is something which actually Ukrainian intellectuals and artists have been sensing and I think trying to convey for a long time, and therefore Ukrainian intellectual and cultural field can be useful as this type of translators. And I'm not only talking about the specific Russian experience of political action, but rather the authoritarianism, this authoritarian type of seeing the world. So I'll stop here, and if there is time for other remarks, I'd love to join later.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Olesya, for being with us from Kiev. I do hope the air alarm doesn't disturb you from taking part in the discussion further on, because sometimes that happens. And now I would like to turn the question to Boris Filonenko, a co-curator of the National Pavilion, a curator and a co-publisher from Kharkiv. You started preparing the project for the Venice Biennale almost a year ago, right after the announcement of the results of the competition were taken. And I know that almost everything was ready by 24th of February. And you even managed to bring out a lot of things from Kharkiv under shelling. But what has changed in the project itself and in its context, in its concept, within the last 2 months?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I would like to thank you that you're here. And I don't know where to start, because it's a lot of questions for these days, speaking about Ukraine, art, and the role of artists and culture in this war. So mostly in Ukrainian Pavilion we are talking about the war, not about particular artwork. But for me it's also important point to tell you a long story, but in a short version, about the main project by Pavlo Makov, artist from Kharkiv. And the name of this work is Fountain of Exhaustion, and because of it, this topic of exhaustion is the main one through we are speaking about today's war and today's world challenges. It's many more questions, yeah, how many meanings can work contains, and how many times meanings of an artwork, of artist piece can be shifted because of circumstances, because of changes around, and because of changing of context. For the first time, Fountain of Exhaustion was made in 1995 as an idea to talk about very local situation in the city of Kharkiv in the eastern part of Ukraine. It's a big city with a lot of constructivist architecture, many processes in 20s and 30s with avant-garde literature, theater and art. For today I can say that it was 3 Nobel Prize laureates in this city, and it's a very big city with 1.5 million people here. And now for around 60 days, Kharkiv is under siege and under shelling every day, and Russian missiles was in every district of the city, and many cultural points was destroyed, and it still continues. In this local situation, this artwork was very about Kharkiv and the experience of Pavlo Makov as an artist who is very place-based artist. He decided to be like anthropologist, like a researcher of his own space, and some legends behind the space of landscape of Kharkiv, rivers of Kharkiv, and the topic of this work was about lack of vitality in 90s in Kharkiv, and Fountain of Exhaustion was like a symbol of this time in Kharkiv especially. After 20 years, 25 years, this work was represented again in many different forms in art centers, in exhibitions, and this work became a different one because Pavlo decided to talk about much different questions with his artwork, questions of resources, a question of exhaustion and lack of resources, questions of exhaustion of politics and our ways to live together. And now this shift is a new one from 24th of February is a question of war, and question how this work can communicate with audience, with us, and how we feel about this work now. So for Makov himself, this artwork was finished for the first time in Venice. We can see how it's working with water inside, and it's finished because all attention from artists to the world, which was important for previous years, now looking like a statement that all these attentions was lost it, and exhaustion is here. Yeah, but we live in a time of exhaustion, and Kharkiv is really exhausted city now, and this local context is important again. For me, there is many other questions about art in the times of war because of this well-known and corrected quote from Theodor Adorno about possibility of art after Auschwitz, art after many tragedies of the 20th century. It was always a question of artistic statements and artistic speechless of artists in such a strong context, because war is more bigger situation, yeah, which changed everything, changed lives of every one of us. And surprisingly, yeah, now I see every day many new works and new statements from artists, and I know the stories of many of them, and I see how they volunteering for every day and having the rest to take this distance about which Alevtina told today. Yes, this difference, this privilege for having an hour to make a new artwork, but also to be, I can say, creative in your volunteering work. I can remember some examples, like a project from Lviv, which has a title Kitchen, Kuchnia. It's a project where an artist making food every day, and performer and poet Yaroslav Futimsky explained me why he decided to be here in this particular project. And his like kind of manifesto for these deeds was that he thought that people in these times of war will be happy to eat not only simple food, but also fucking good food, and artists can do it for them. Yeah, and it's one of the ways how artists thinking, yeah, in this situation. And my last statement for this first part is about what Serhiy just said today about art as a kind of solution, and art as a possibility for building bridges. And I can say that for me there is two ways. One of them is a kind of one of my favorite stories about artist Robert Rauschenberg, who had some writings in his diary after the Second World War, and there he wrote that he decided to be an artist right after he saw that Hitler is very afraid of artists, because the first thing in very few days of his winning on elections, he decided to close Bauhaus school and to make another type of art for the government and new regime. But another question really important now is a question about bridges and impossibility of some bridges. Yeah, here in Biennale, we are talking too much about Russian pavilion and our statements of canceling of Russian culture and the voice from Russian artists. And this is also an important part of our life now, what we are thinking about this kind of dialogue. Yeah, and I can say that I would like to share my disappointment and how useless was this ways of talking with aggressor for all these 80 years, and how this aggressor country became also a terroristic state, and can we go and speak with this side? Yeah. So I can say that first text in the very first days of war, which I was editing, was about our position about Russian pavilion, to close it. And it's another side of, or maybe it's the same side of this speech about importance of culture in this war. So, finalizing, I would like to say that I'm here because of a kind of this feeling of a duty to be here in these days and then to come back to Ukraine, because many of us also decided to represent Ukraine with a strong voice, not with absence in Biennale, and to show who are Ukrainian artists, who we are, why our cultural positions completely another, why it's a good, why it's a bad way to communicate, to give, try to make a dialogue between Russian and Ukrainian artists in galleries and public talks. It's a bad way, and it's not resolve any problems. So culture is a very basement of this war, and cultural differences between Ukraine and Russia. From Russian point of view, from colonial point of view, from imperial point of view, we are not exist as Ukrainians with our culture. From Ukrainian point of view, we know that very well that we are completely different, and you know, it's a lack of imperialistic way of looking at the world, because you can't see any diversity near you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Boris. Well, actually, I would like to have another question to all of you, or maybe to those of you who want to answer it. Is maybe I will ask first the question to Sergei Plokhy that I had, and then to all the others. Sergei, how do you think, what would be the name of this war afterwards? Can it be the war of cultures? Can it be, you know, a war between imperial and decolonial? What could be the name given to what is happening now?
Well, there is a discussion going on, including among Ukrainian historians, about what that war should be called. Well, for me as a historian, it's very clear what it is, because it is a story of the disintegration of one of the last traditional empires, and historically, the majority of them fall apart in the middle of war and conflict. Looking at Europe, from the Ottoman Empire to Austria-Hungary, what was happening with French Empire in Indochina, and so on and so forth. And from the Ukrainian point of view, this is the war that is a war of liberation. So I personally decided for myself what it is, what the label is about. But again, there is multiplicity of ways of looking at this war, and it is also dependent on that perspective, depending on your personal experience in it. For me, again, as a historian, it is also a war of narratives. And one narrative is not just imperial, is the narrative of denying the right of another nation to exist. Never been, doesn't exist, shouldn't be in the future. As simple as that. Which is a form of a genocide, and then it is being translated into actual genocide. Those who can't be de-Ukrainized get killed. And other narrative is about no, we exist. And we were there, and we have this right, and we are united in our difference to a degree, because again, the model of the war was, okay, if you speak Russian, you are supposed to be Russian, and your identity has to be Russian, and loyalty to the state should be Russian, and Ukraine responded to that differently. So it is in a sense of a clash of different worldviews. And that's what, going back to the original question that you asked, to what degree it is local, to what degree it is global. On the one hand, it's very local issues that are being decided, okay, let's say Russian-Ukrainian relations, and the right to exist for other East Slavic groups, which was questioned back in the 19th century because the prohibition of the publications in Ukrainian language for more than 40 years, what it is than just an attempt to arrest and to kill the formation of a modern nation. The argument is still the same. So on the one hand, it is local in that sense. But it is global in terms that I just discussed, that there are issues of freedom, there are issues of democracy. Again, they sound cliche, but those are very specific issues that Ukrainians are prepared to risk their lives for and are dying now. Returning, going back to what the war is about, it's on one level it's about the right to live. Okay? So again, one more level, and we will decide on the name.
May I add on that?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I very much agree with Sergei Plukhy, who I personally think is one of the best interpreters, actually, of Ukrainian history and Ukrainian kind of experience. But when I also think about this Russia's war, Russian invasion, I think one thing it's doing, it undermines the sort of international dream that the world, a dream of the world where every nation has equal agency. And therefore, every society has equal agency, and there are even groups in the society who have agency. What Russian narrative is stating, that there are only few societies who have a real agency, and the rest have to somehow subdue to the agency of the few. And what's even more, the dream of equal agency, as Russian narrative states, is the past. It's in the past. And the future belongs to mighty forces who only have agency, political agency. And Ukrainian resistance is precisely resistance to this future. I'm sorry for being, again, so melodramatic in these words, but this is how it is perceived from Kiev. This war is about the formative ideal of the world, whether it's based on the idea of equal political agency of different countries, or is it based on the idea of agency by force?
Thank you, Olesa. My next question would be to Alevtina and Boris. Boris, you mentioned that Hitler was afraid of Rauschenberg, and Rauschenberg wanted to somehow run his front and, use his art as a weapon against Hitler by doing actually what he was supposed to do, doing his art. I remember when for the first time, I realized how important this movement and this idea of cancel Russian culture was when I heard Putin speaking in front of some Russian, education or cultural leaders, and he was complaining, that now as this special operation unfolds, the world is trying to cancel Russia, but it is impossible, And I realized, if he mentions that in his speech and he's complaining about that, that means that hurts him. So my question to you would be, really, how do you think how important this cultural front is, and can it really make the difference in the in the result of this war?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that let's say Russian intellectuals, they looks like anti-Putin, right? They looks like they are not with him. Even, let's say, they are his enemies. But it's interesting, they became our enemies, so we are not friends. This is a triangle. And if to talk about canceling Russia, oh, I had time. Being in a cellar without light, we couldn't actually switch light on. 40 days to think over. And I know what I mean. I also must say that Ukrainian society, if to talk about intellectuals, very diverse. Could be different positions. And I'm just talking about my opinion, okay? So my thoughts was follow. First of all, why Russian intellectual must be exception of sanction. If ordinary Russian received economical sanctions, why they have not to receive? Because culture is also business in a sense. They receive some money, right? This is first point. Second point, time. Since, as I just described, I didn't function as an artist, as a Ukrainian artist. Being in a cellar, trying just to pack my works, being such a scare, this is the biggest fear, that my work would be burned. So I packed them, spent 2 weeks, and I put all my lovable projects on a site. It was not just to make this diary, which many people say that it's important and they really can understand what was in 21st century or something like this. So I was losing time. I realized that I'm losing time. But Russians, they don't lose the time. And in order just to talk about be fair, they have to wait. This is the second. Third, content. Unfortunately, I really thank you so much that you're talking about that. From one hand, this was so much about past. All countries like France, I'm sorry, the UK, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not historical, the Netherlands where I was studying, they did homework. I remember all my friends in the Jan van Eyck Academy, they all the time were telling me, we are not proud that we are colonial, Alevtina. I was too young, 2004. I remember the sentences from them. I never heard it from Russians. I never remember that any Russian said me, Alevtina, I'm sorry that we actually colonized Nenci, Buryati. Okay, Ukrainians, it's still a question in the world, I'm sorry. So this is probably the work we have to do. So, and the literature we are talking about, visual arts, other arts, it's also not reflected through this focus that Russia was imperialistic state before the October Revolution, and then Soviet Union. I don't know why the world believed that it was not imperial state. Me as a girl was born in Donetsk with a Georgian surname. I will tell you for hours how I was really understood where my place is. So, hello to Georgians. So, Soviet Union was not the union where there were republics on the same level and equally. And one example I will give you, how it's possible that my grandma spoke Ukrainian. I remember. And how it's happened that my mother tongue is Russian, that my own mom never spoke to me Ukrainian. Can you just imagine I'm asking moms and papas, fathers, who can just stop speaking to your kid in another language if you didn't move to another country? It's strange. I know that it's still a question, there was Ukraine as a colony or not. I'm an artist, I'm a practitioner. I do remember that since I'm a performance artist and I do go on a stage and speak, unfortunately, I lost my method. I don't have my mother tongue at all. So I never will speak naturally and nicely in Ukrainian. But I'm fine, don't make victim of me. I will manage, so I will put all this kind of my shitty Ukrainian in humor or something like this, I will manage. Don't really like spend time to. So it's not our role. It's Russians. They are very good in this to complain. So I'm not. And the thing is that it's so interesting what happened to me as an artist. And artists, they always talk about themselves. Of course, they are very egoistic, but still, this reflection could become a background, even for historian or for society to understand. I remember that after the first facilities in Donbass, when Russian army or hybrid Russian troops went to my hometown, which I haven't visited from 2013, I opened the book with Russian poem I couldn't read. And this is the last point. I'm sorry, my international colleagues. Something strange happened to Ukrainians. When I'm sitting on a panel with Russian and when I hear accent, I just feel so bad. Of course, this is not politically correct to talk like this. Maybe I will spend some time and to go to psychotherapist or something like this, but since artists are allowed to talk about feelings and allow themselves to be not really politically correct, because I'm not a diplomat, I'm talking about what I do feel, what I really do know my body feels. And you even can describe me how I can manage with these feelings, but what I'm saying, I'm very, very honest. So we have a lot of problems with Russian culture, and we feel a lot. And I remember when 24th of February started, and whole world found out that we all have a war, and I received many, many invitations. And many of my friends, they wanted the best. I'm so pleased. I'm so thankful to them. They wanted to take me in their peaceful countries. And I said no. And they asked, Alevtina, what we can do for you? And my answer is, please listen to us. Please listen to Ukrainians. If it's big things for you to listen us, just tell me immediately, no, we can't listen to you. But this is really what I actually felt in that time and feel now. I really believe that if somebody in crisis, some people could say when you're in trauma you can't speak, but I already just said the evidence, because I'm pretty in a distance, because an artist I can allow myself. So I really believe that if somebody in a crisis, so we do know, not better, we just do know something, which is somehow not possible for people from outside to understand. Did I mention that Russian didn't make the homework for the, yeah, this is also important, thank you.
Yeah, and I just remembered seeing these images on the internet with the recent campaign in Russia saying that we are not ashamed, you know. So that's the contrary of what you're saying. They are not ready to recognize, they are not ready to be sorry, because they are not ashamed of anything. Boris, do you want to add?
Yeah, maybe I would like to add a few words to this point of Serhiy about the war of narratives, because in art we have the same situation with wars of narratives also. And this main question about decolonizing and post-colonial way of talking about relationships between Russian and Ukrainian art, it's a way to make Ukrainian presence in different artistic narratives more visible. And of course, expectations from art and culture are not so huge, yeah, in the times of war, because just yesterday I read this book of Leonora Carrington, Milk of Dreams, And there is one ironic fairy tale about the boy who started to smoking. His dad was not happy about it and gave him spankings. And then he took his son to the movie. And after watching the movie, this boy never smoked. Yeah, and it's like our usual way of thinking. And after movie, you will never do the bad things. But in reality, we see absolutely another difficult question about connections. Culture with propaganda, and it's very small differences between them in many things. And this term, great Russian culture, must be criticized. There is no Russian culture without Russian tanks, as we are talking about it. So I think it's very important also, the main question for me, how to talk about Ukrainian art, how to talk about artists and their works now, and to show who we are again, these questions. Yes, and back to Ukrainian Pavilion, our decision was to make our job as we planned before the war, but to shift our way of talking about this war. And for me, it's a very important point now.
Thank you so much. And we're not only privileged to be able to slow down a little bit from the hectics of nowadays and the situation, and get a distance to think about it and reflect on things, but we also have a privilege of being here together and having you, audience, with us. And I think we still have some minutes for possible questions from the audience, if there are some. Or we can just give our speakers another, let's say, final word to wrap up the discussion and move on with more things to go on these last days of biennial preview. Sergei, do you want to start?
Well, yeah, I was waiting for a question and easy way out. Now I have to come up with my own question. I'm as I was listening, I was thinking about the war and art and the category of Ukrainian art and what it is and what the war does to it and what happens with the borders. You defend the borders of the country, whether you defend the borders of your art, how porous you make them to be, to what degree, speaking about going back to the original question, to the local and national, try to use the language, or you use them anyway, whether you try or not, that is international, because you are talking about the issues that are global. So again, it's not. I have no real suggestions, but these are thoughts that I had and questions that I had in terms of the impact of the war on culture of a nation that is defending itself, defending the right to be, and also defining itself, or maybe redefining itself in the course of this war, in relation with Russia, yes, but in relation with the rest of the world as well. So this is the issue that I would ask the panel if I would be sitting over there. I'm sure you have maybe other questions of your own, but if you have anything, if you could comment on that, I would really appreciate that.
I think we could even take it as the topic for one of the next sessions and next discussions throughout the public program. But who is ready to answer now, please?
For me, this question is not about the national, but a question of just practices in local context, not local as Ukrainian, but more local like Muzici context or Kharkiv context for Pavlo Makov. Yeah, and also in a cultural way, usually I'm talking about the cultures inside the field. Now we're more talking about citizenship, yeah, about our decision to be politically Ukrainians, and in this point, yes, many artists, which today I call them Ukrainian artists, it's artists with Ukrainian citizenship, and citizenship as a way of acting and taking some responsibility for the future of the country, and also artistic and cultural institutions. We're talking about it a lot with my friends who, some of them was Russians in 90s, but decided to be Ukrainians and change their citizenship as an act of their understanding and decision to be here in this field, and in this way of making different ways of life, yeah, and it's also connected for cultural institutions. And because of this, for us, even this gesture when Russians burn their passports is not so clear for us, because it's too late to change this state of mind. Yeah, now when war was started in a full-scale phase. Yeah, this war started from Crimea, I think, in this period, and it was too many years to make a statement, to make decision, to protest in many ways. So I'm agree with you that it's not a very good term, Ukrainian art. Even more, I can say that art is not a good term because we have only artists and their practices. But it's kind of my answer to you.
Yeah, I also like to add a bit. Actually, it's interesting that, as I just already mentioned, that many of my friends wanted to take me from Muzici. And actually I said no, and of course they wanted some explanations. And of course I'm an artist. Of course maybe the sound now will be so naive, but still it can be also an answer to you, Sergei. I was answering in my drawings, not just to my friends. I was drawing that I'm standing in my village in Muzici like a plant, which is never run away, any danger come, or person with the scissors to cut a bit of salad, or cow come to take some limbs of grass, right? So there is a drawing that I am standing and some plants around, and I am just standing because I want to be like a plant, not to run away because danger is so close. And it's interesting that, again, I don't know, it's also my question to audience who is Westerners and also who is from America. It's interesting that this suggestion for me to run away, it could be actually pretty practicable and possible for me, or for even 8 million. But is it possible that whole country will run away? Let's count 42 million. For moment, not possible. Maybe 20 million, for sure, by Ukrainian law must stay. Is it possible to take something like 20 million of Ukrainians? For me, when people suggested me to run away, I always thought that it's not the solution of the situation. Why I'm so smart? Not just because I'm so smart, because my mom, I remember from 2014, I spent a lot of time to force her to run away. And her answer was, I didn't make anything wrong to run away. And then I started to defend her decision. And I started to answer to all my friends in Kyiv who at that time didn't understand her position and sometimes even blame that so many people stay in an occupied territory. And I always was saying, she's not a furniture, it's her right to be there. And then I started to talk to my Kyiv friend, now I talk to you. But what we can do that all Ukrainians, me personally, would stay in Muzici. I will tell you, my house, so beautiful. My studio, the best studio in the world. I will never get this in the West so soon. Who will give me this? I really working for this studio for all my adult life. I even painted the walls myself. I don't understand why I have to lose this. This is again the question. The shortest way to solve the problem, just to understand what Ukrainians ask. And I know that probably you could be scared of Ukrainians, but why? Because the saying is that before the revolution in Ukraine, 2013, then 2014, and then we got Donbass situation, and Crimea was annexed. I was not so naive. I really wanted to believe in everything what Immanuel Kant wrote, this essay of, you know, this peace. You would say sustainable, but this word is perpetual, right? Peace. Вечный мир. So he produced this essay, and I was reading this, 18th century. Unfortunately, I admitted, and I also call for you to admit, we are monsters. In 21st centuries, there is this thought that people kill each other at once by numbers. And it doesn't matter that somebody could be ignorant because weapon is producing in almost in each country, I think, but in the West for sure. And the whole issue that contradiction is this, that I'm not saying that I'm a pacifist or I ask to not take weapon. I ask for a weapon because if you ignore it, Russian and Ukrainians still will fight. For sure, they will do. But the problem is that you can talk to Ukrainian soldiers because some of Ukrainian soldiers is my friends, artists, who decided to go and take a gun. Can you just talk to Russian soldiers? Unfortunately, Russian intellectuals also don't talk to Russian soldiers. This is the problem. Just ask them why they don't talk to them. We do talk to our soldiers. This is the whole issue about this war. And again, about plants. I also, in my drawings, trying to be still not naive, still to be an artist, with this belief that plants, they're just amazing because they rebuild their bodies so well that they can allow themselves not to run away as danger is. They also can allow themselves to lose a bit of some part of them because they don't have organs, they don't have head, they don't have neck, heart, you know, they don't. They rebuild their bodies. I am not asking to rebuild our bodies, I am asking to rebuild institutions, that they will be not hierarchical, that would be not as somehow reminding us, a bit like our bodies, that there is a head, there is a heart. I believe that it's possible. And even if you will be very smart, you will find some examples of some institution. For instance, Wikipedia, for instance, with everyone somehow build it. And it's no one who really does run it. And it's again, if to talk how we can dream about peace. Also, again, of course, if Ukrainians will answer the question what they actually wish, and they said ending the war, it would be really not the right answer, if it's possible to be right answer. They all would like to rebuild the cities. They all would like have peace. And you can't somehow be in a war without dreaming. So if to talk about my dream or my vision or my imagination, This is so much about that ending the war. It must be somehow huge work for everyone, for Ukrainians and for whole world to think over how it's possible that such a huge power, which president on one country cannot be withdrawn. I don't understand it. Being in Ukraine, I really can't. That is 150 million in like hostages, в заложниках. Yeah, something like this. I can't understand it. So, and the whole issue that the talk must be very serious, and not like with, I like kids, but with really adults, when there is understanding where guilt is, and actually about the shame. Burning passport for me is nothing. Actions. Come to Ukraine to be with us. We have friendly police. No one will take any Russian artist to put in jail for 15 days or even years, as they say. I really promise, nothing would happen. They could really be just on our side, and only the action could help. Not just excuse as a word. I remember that one talk with Russian artist, she just directly asked me before 24 February, Alevtina, you also think that I should ask forgiveness from each Ukrainian? I look at her and I said, we don't need from each, just every force. You are like 4 times bigger. We are 42 million, Russian are 150. So we don't need 4 times excuse from Russians. You know, just they can count every force, maybe, from the beginning. And still, I think the whole world should somehow to rethink how it can be function, but if the world decided we agree to be monsters, to kill each other, but I also will accept if majorities decide. But my vision is really like to believe what Kant wrote, to follow the example of plants who are not so aggressive or less aggressive. This how maybe I talk too much, I'm sorry. So I spent 50 days in my village. I talked only to my neighbors.
It's great to hear you, and I'm grateful that you're sharing your experience. But I just wanted to somehow reply to what you just said. And it seems that the civil agreement that largest part of the world had just suddenly, broke. And it seems like there is no way to stop this war of everyone against everyone after Hobbes. And we deeply need to work on the new agreement, to go on, to live on, because otherwise, this just won't be able to stop. Olesa, are you with us here?
Yes, still with you. I actually was thinking about Sergei Plokhy's question, why do we use the word Ukrainian artist so often? What's the reason for it? And I think there are two reasons as I identify myself. One is actually one has to do with the very type of Russian aggression, and it's genocidal. Since what does Russian narrative says? There are no Ukrainians. Ukrainians do not exist. And this need to stress on being Ukrainian is actually a reaction to that. Every time to remind yourself and the world that Ukrainians do exist and the artists living in Ukraine are Ukrainian artists. That's the reaction to genocide threat. And another thing is actually comes from another reasoning explanation comes from our COVID experience. If you remember, there was this observation during COVID time in Kiev. COVID seems like the past. I am aware that it's not like that in all the countries. But there was this observation that COVID was a global threat that was being dealt with nationally. The threat was global, but every country, every nation has its own set of policies. to deal with it. And it's more a little bit like that with this Russian war. This war is truly global. It violates global way of existence, or global really let me be more cliche, it violates global peace, but we are dealing with it nationally on the level of Ukraine only, which is probably the right way to deal. But as a result, we stress this belonging all the time. When we talk about artists, we stress that they are Ukrainian artists as a result of those two things.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having this conversation, having you here and the audience. I think it was important to start this broader public discussion with a very local conversation about how this war of Russia against Ukraine actually changes the world. And we will talk about the world more. And I was criticized a little bit by my colleagues for making this panel very Ukrainian, you know, and for that it possibly will be like a very internal conversation, not, you know, not understandable or not interesting enough for foreigners. But I was convinced, and I'm still convinced, that it is really important that we finally, you know, have this opportunity to speak, have this opportunity to be heard, and to explain actually the nature of this war, the nature of this conflict, and what really is happening from our point of view, not from the point of view of the other side, which actually was happening for decades and maybe even for centuries. So we're absolutely sure that it's time for everyone to speak for oneself and say and speak their own stories. And as this discussion closes, we will start working on the next sessions, the next topics. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this program will be open to all the biennial community, and we invited already all the curators and commissioners of other national pavilions present at the biennial this year to work together on the programming, actually, on the narratives, the topics, the formats and speakers of the following discussions, and we will announce as soon as we have you know, the program finished, and we will be inviting you to come here in Venice over from May to November, or hopefully be able to stream all the following sessions as well, and follow, you know, this discussion on how art is reflecting on what is happening now and the changes in the world. And before we leave, I would like to thank everyone under this, who's behind this event and who was involved, and thanks to whom we have the privilege. And I would like to say first that we had this privilege of being here, coming here and talking, and actually having some kind of distance from the violence that happens in Ukraine now. First of all, to the to the Ukrainian army and to the defenders that are there at the front now, to the Ukrainian government and all the people in Ukraine and volunteers who are doing their everyday job to win this war and doing something little to win this war every day. And a lot of them are really artists and musicians and actors and directors who are there at the front, and we just hope that they will, you know, they will not only win the war, but they will all be healthy and strong to continue their artistic practices afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank the Biennale, the Venice Biennale, who hosted us today in this beautiful Teatro Piccolo, and who actually supported the idea of having the public program that came from the National Pavilion and the Ukrainian Institute that I represent, and who are supporting and our partners in this project. And I would like to thank also the International Renaissance Foundation, who helped us bring and have our respected speakers today. And thank you the technical crew that made it also smooth and available for everyone. And thank you speakers again. Thank you Olesa, Boris, Alevtina, Serhii. Thank you all. And Slava Ukraini.
Thank you, Tanya.